And I suppose the net is being thrown far and wide these days, because when you say somebody with a disability, you're talking about people who are going deaf, like I am in my old age, people who are going blind or who are blind. But I mean, those qualify as learning disabilities, I suppose, as well, don't they?
Learning disabilities is quite specific.
Is it? Okay.
It is a reduced intellectual, and it's a lifelong condition, whereas hearing loss and sight loss are often just for part of a life. But those with what we call a learning disability, it is from birth, it is for life. It is 1.5 million people in the population. 2% of the population have a learning disability. It's quite important to distinguish that sometimes it's mixed up with things like dyslexia. Dyslexia is not an intellectual disability.
Okay.
It's a problem, it's a difficulty for sure.
Yeah.
But it's not a disability. Those with learning disabilities will often, not always, but often struggle to communicate and have difficulty with everyday tasks like managing their money and household responsibilities.
So as you say, a pretty precise definition of what a learning disability is. And having a child with a learning disability must have given you a huge understanding of the subject.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Our Tom has autism. He's high-functioning autistic, and has a moderate learning disability.
Right.
But it certainly, for us, it just opened up a door to a new world. I hadn't thought about it too much, if I'm honest, because that's life, isn't it? You only think about it when it's under your nose.
Yeah.
And we've been so blessed by Tom in every way, now 22. He's helped me more than anyone else to understand the nature of life,
right?
To understand really what it is to be fearfully and wonderfully made, as the psalmist put it.
And just as a by-the-by, fascinatingly, of course, often people with autism of some kind have one particular talent that really shines.
That can be the case. That's certainly not true for all autistic people, but it is true that some, because they drill down, one of the triad of features of autism is an obsessional or a fixation on a particular thing.
Right,
so you
right.
find that autistic people may be an absolute expert. I remember meeting one who was an expert on the park benches in Plymouth, and they knew the exact location and proportions of it, or they may know the bus timetable, or that is true of some, but for all autistic people there is a challenge in communication and often in relating to other people. Let me say, not all autistic people have a learning disability. Some don't have a learning disability.
Okay. So it's quite a spectrum, isn't it? Yeah,
it is an incredible spectrum.
Thinking about this and what you described as what is often the case with someone with a learning disability, how can churches tackle that? Because we can't reduce everything down to a hugely simplistic level, can we?
Sure. What we need to do is ensure that our churches are welcoming to everyone. One of the strap lines we have at Prospects is, if you know how to welcome people with learning disabilities, you'll be good at welcoming everyone. Mm-hmm. Because it's about being considerate. It's about getting into other people's shoes, other people's minds, and reflecting on how can they access what we're doing. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we do in Prospects, Christian Learning Disability Charity, is to have ministry groups specifically for people with learning disabilities. If you factor in that many people with a learning disability have no language or very little language.
Right.
Some will never speak. Many will, but some will never speak. So these are big challenges, and we've found from experience that actually it's a blessing, not always, but often, to have a separate group for people with learning disabilities. So they'll meet together to worship, they'll meet together to pray, they'll share their prayers how they can. Lots of participation, lots of songs. You'd love it, John. And it's a great atmosphere, and not a long sermon. So
right. Sounds good, even better.
Yes.
In the way that you might have a separate teenager service or a separate children's event. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And actually, there are moments when to be inclusive, as with children and young people, as with people with learning disabilities, to be inclusive, you actually need exclusive activities to bless and help them.
Yeah.
So we've got over 200 ministry groups like that around the country.
Wow.
And over 3,000 people meet in those groups month by month, which I find incredibly exciting.